I'm afraid of him. Her whisper cut through the cold night like a blade. The words clung to the air, brittle and trembling. John Carver's hand froze mid-reach, a burlap sack dangling from his fingers. The barn smelled of hay, sweat, and the faint copper tang of blood. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, carrying the low murmur of the creek past the corral. He stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the straw-strewn floor. Who's got you so scared?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. The girl didn't look up. Her hair was matted, streaked with dirt, shadows cutting across her pale face. She pressed something small and hard to her chest, the motion almost protective. Carver's eyes flicked to the sack. Something inside shifted, just slightly, but enough to make him hesitate. The weight of unknown danger pressed on him, and memories of the last 3 years on this lonely ranch pressed heavier. He hadn't seen fear like this in a long time, not since the incident with Miller's gang. Her breathing quickened. "Please, don't make him find me." A shiver ran down Carver's spine. The barn doors were ajar, letting in moonlight that fell in fractured beams across the dirt floor. He thought he saw movement beyond them, a shadow that didn't belong. A sudden creak above, the loft, made him jerk his head upward. The air seemed to thicken. Something was watching. Carver crouched slightly, placing the sack on the floor but leaving it unopened. "I won't hurt you," he murmured. But even as the words left his lips, doubt gnawed at him. Who had terrorized this girl to make her cower like that? And what in that sack was enough to make him hesitate? The wind whispered through the cracks in the barn walls, carrying the scent of horses and faint smoke from the nearby town. A distant dog barked, then silence. Carver's ears strained. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was approaching, slow but deliberate. He shifted his weight, hand brushing the handle of his Colt, eyes locked on her trembling figure. Her gaze darted toward the barn door, then back to him, pleading. Time seemed suspended. The faint scuff of boots outside sent a chill through him. The world narrowed to the girl, the sack, and the approaching footsteps. Carver inhaled, bracing for the first move. The next sound would decide everything. The scuffing grew louder. Carver's grip tightened on the Colt at his side, though he hadn't drawn it yet. The girl pressed herself closer to the wall, her knuckles white around the small bundle she clutched. "He'll kill me," she whispered again, voice barely audible. "He will if he finds me here." Carver's mind raced. The law in these parts was thin and slow, and the nearest town was hours away. Shelter and secrecy might keep her alive, for now. But harboring someone so clearly hunted would draw eyes, tongues, suspicion. Neighbors weren't kind to people who meddled in others' affairs, especially if those others carried reputations for brutality. He lowered himself to sit on a hay bale, eyeing her. "I don't even know your name." "Lila," she said softly. Her voice trembled. "Please, just let me stay, for a while." A faint cough outside made them both jump. Carver's eyes darted to the open barn doors. Moonlight revealed a silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, hands resting near a belt with the glint of metal. Not a stranger. Someone who knew the girl. Maybe someone who wouldn't leave until he found her. "Lila, listen to me," Carver said, voice steadying. "If I keep you here, it'll only be for tonight. I need to know. What's so dangerous that you can't even speak his name?" She shook her head, tears catching the moonlight. "You don't understand. He's relentless. He doesn't care who sees, who he hurts. And if anyone helps me..." Her words broke. Carver's gaze flicked to the sack again. Whatever was inside, it might be their only leverage, or a curse waiting to unfold. The moral weight pressed on him. Protect a terrified girl and risk the wrath of a man he hadn't met, or turn away and leave her to her fate. Outside, the shadows shifted. The wind carried faint murmurs, like voices whispering in the dark. Lila flinched. Carver took a slow, deliberate breath. He could hear the tension in her pulse, see the quiver in her fingers. Every instinct in him screamed to act. "All right," he finally said. "You stay. But we have rules. You follow them, and we survive tonight. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Or you." A scraping sound came from the loft above, making both of them freeze. Dust trickled down from the boards. Something, or someone, was moving. Carver's jaw tightened. Whatever decision he made next, it would either save her or drag them both into a danger they couldn't escape. The barn doors rattled with a stronger gust, or maybe it was a hand, pushing. A dark figure loomed outside, and in the dim light, Carver glimpsed a face he would never forget. The figure stepped into the sliver of moonlight, boots crunching over the loose gravel outside. Carver's hand hovered over his Colt, knuckles white, but he stayed low, hiding behind the beam that split the barn in half. Lila pressed herself against the opposite wall, eyes wide, breathing shallow. "Lila," the man said, voice low, measured, but carrying a weight that made the barn feel smaller. "I know you're in there." Carver's mind raced. Recognition sparked. This was him, the man she feared. The stories had been whispered in taverns and around campfires. A relentless man, merciless when crossed. And now he was here, standing in the shadowed doorway, scanning, patient. Carver forced his voice steady. "She's just a child. You don't need to." The man's eyes flicked to Oward Carver, sharp as flint. A warning spark danced there. "Move, and she dies," he said softly. Then louder, as if addressing both. "You think you can hide her? That she'll forgive you when I find out?" Lila's cry broke the tense silence. She darted toward Carver, hands clutching at his coat. "Please, don't let him." Outside, more shadows began to gather. Hoofbeats or boots. Whispers in the wind hinted at more than one pursuer. Carver's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed fight, but he was outnumbered, outgunned, and this man wasn't known for mercy. He edged toward the loft ladder, hoping to gain a vantage point. The barn smelled of sweat, hay, and the faint copper of blood, a reminder that hesitation could be fatal. "Lila, stay behind me. Don't move," he whispered, voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. The pursuer's gaze swept the barn again, slow, deliberate, like a predator measuring prey. His hand twitched near a belt that carried both knife and gun. Every second stretched, each one loaded with potential disaster. Then, a sudden crack. Wood splintered from the loft above. Both Carver and Lila froze. Something or someone had shifted, and the sound carried the warning of imminent confrontation. The wind outside whistled through gaps in the barn, carrying the faint metallic scent of danger. Carver's mind raced. He could hear the distant rumble of hooves growing louder. If he stayed, he'd be trapped between the girl and a man known for brutality. If he ran, Lila would be exposed. Every choice seemed doomed. A single gunshot rang from the far side of the barn, echoing like a death knell. Lila screamed, and Carver's hand slammed onto his Colt. Time slowed. The standoff had begun. Carver pressed Lila against the wall, listening to the ragged beat of her heart. The echo of the gunshot still hung in the air, mixing with the creak of the barn and the wind slipping through broken boards. Outside, hoofbeats thundered closer, and voices murmured in the distance, low and urgent. He offered her a tin cup of water, the metal clinking softly. "Here," he said. "Drink. You need strength." She hesitated, trembling, then took it, her fingers brushing his. There was trust in that small contact, fragile but present, as if the touch could hold back the storm beyond the doors. Carver's eyes lingered on her face, dirty, pale, but alive, and he realized the depth of what he'd taken on. Protecting her wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about humanity, about something older than fear or danger. "You don't have to speak," he said softly. "Just hold on. We'll get through this." Lila's gaze fell to the bundle she had clutched since the first moment he'd seen her. Slowly, cautiously, she set it on the floor. Carver bent, revealing a small carved wooden figure, its edges worn smooth. She whispered, He took my brother. This is all I have left." Carver nodded, understanding without words. The weight of grief, loss, and fear hung between them, heavier than any weapon outside. He reached out, placing his hand lightly on hers, a promise they both needed, but neither could voice. Above, the loft creaked again, a shadow moving in the moonlight. Carver tensed, eyes flicking upward. Lila's hand clutched his sleeve. "He's coming," she said. He swallowed, the image of the wooden figure in his mind, imagining her brother's eyes in the carvings. In that silence, a new resolve settled over him. They would face whatever came together, not as prey and protector, but as two souls clinging to what little hope remained. The barn smelled of hay, smoke, and distant fire now, an olfactory warning that the outside threat was consolidating. A single lantern swayed near the door, catching the eyes of someone he couldn't yet identify. He felt the tension in the air, balance between dread and fragile connection. Carver whispered, "No matter what happens, you're not alone. Not tonight." The girl nodded, eyes wide but steady. And then, a distant shout, muffled but urgent, came from beyond the barn doors. Hooves stomped harder, dust rising in the wind. Carver's pulse quickened. They weren't safe, not yet. And now, the impossible choice loomed closer. Stay and fight together, or flee and risk everything they'd just begun to protect. The barn door rattled violently, as if the night itself were trying to force entry. The barn doors burst open, splintering wood scattering across the floor. Moonlight cut harsh lines across the hay and dust. Carver pivoted, Colt drawn, heart hammering. Lila ducked behind him, clutching the wooden figure to her chest. The man who had haunted her appeared first, eyes cold, hands twitching near his gun. Behind him, two more shadowed figures moved with purpose. Carver's mind raced. There was no way to hold them all off. But the girl's fear, raw and unshielded, anchored his resolve. "Step away from her," Carver called, voice steady, carrying more authority than he felt. "She's done nothing to you." A laugh, sharp and empty, cut the air. "She owes me, Carver. You think hiding her changes that?" Time slowed. Carver noticed small details, the tension in Lila's shoulders, the stubborn tilt of her chin, the splintered beam above that might give them cover. His fingers itched on the trigger, but strategy, not instinct, ruled. He edged toward the loft ladder, signaling Lila silently. They could climb, disappear into the shadows, maybe even escape the barn entirely. Before he could act, the man lunged forward. Carver sidestepped, firing a warning shot into the ground. The echo shook the barn, dust raining from the rafters. Lila screamed, but did not move. She trusted him. The standoff stretched into unbearable tension. Carver's mind measured every second, every breath. He saw a momentary hesitation in the pursuer's eyes, and in that heartbeat, he made his choice. "Leave her," he shouted. "Take what you came for elsewhere, but not here." A long silence followed, filled only by the whine of the wind and the distant hoofbeats fading. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the men backed off, shadows stretching as they disappeared into the night. The barn doors creaked shut behind them, leaving only Carver and Lila in the trembling quiet. Lila sank to the hay, the wooden figure clutched to her chest. Tears streaked through the dirt on her cheeks. Carver lowered his Colt, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "It's over," he whispered. The night felt impossibly heavy and impossibly still. Outside, the first glimmer of dawn lit the horizon, soft and uncertain. Carver guided Lila to the door, hands steadying her as she took tentative steps into the new day. The world beyond the barn was dangerous, but for this moment, it was theirs. Years later, she would remember the way he had stood there, calm amid chaos, a quiet force in a violent world, and she would remember the smell of hay and dust, the taste of tin cup water, and the weight of human kindness heavy enough to hold her through the dark. Carver watched her walk into the rising sun, the wooden figure held close, and for a fleeting moment, the world felt balanced, precarious, fragile, yet undeniably alive. The camera would linger on the empty barn, a single beam of light cutting through the loft, dust motes dancing in the morning air. The wind whispered through the broken boards, carrying a memory of fear, courage, and survival. Then, silence. The screen fades to black,